friends. This is John, your host of Dairyland Frights. And make sure, wherever you listen to Dairyland Frights, to rate and subscribe us. Give us 5 stars. We truly appreciate it. And make sure you give us a review so we can see how we can improve the show, make it better, and stay spooky. Hello, and welcome to Dairyland Frights, the paranormal podcast that covers everything spooky, creepy, and mysterious in the Midwest and beyond. And today I am, again, always have great guests. And of course, here we go again, more great guests. I have Bill Powers from A Grim Reaper Paranormal. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. How you doing?
I am doing great. So just Bill and I were talking offline. Bill's on about 4 hours of sleep because he had a big event last night.
Oh, I'm so tired.
Talked about some great things. We got some coffee and Bill. So we are excited to not only talk about that.
Well, as I was saying offline, the paranormal hangover is so real right now. I'm completely dead. And that was one of the reasons why I wore a hat. And I'm like, all right, I was like, how can I word it? I just got to like cover up my face because I feel like I have huge bags under my eyes. And my daughter's like, you look horrible.
Thanks, hon.
Yep.
Thanks, sweetie. Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's part of being in the paranormal. It doesn't keep business hours. It's not like 9 to 5 or whatever. It's, whenever you can get out there, or typically it's early morning. So there we go. So let's get right into it. We were talking offline here with Bill. So talk about the event you had last night and some interesting things that happened.
Trying to think how I can word it. And I guess the event that I had, and for those that follow us on social media for the last, I don't know, maybe it's been 3 months, maybe 4 months now, there's been a buildup. And it's been a slow buildup, and I tend to do a lot of videos anywhere. And I mean, you've seen, it'd be static that will come across the screen. Some of the images or some of the video clips are stock. Other ones are ones that I actually film because I own a video production company. And we started this whole project roughly about a little over 2 years ago called The Siege. And The Siege, I guess the best way that I can word it is it's a fully immersive paranormal experience. And I originally pitched it about a year and a half ago at the same location. And at the time I was told no, it wouldn't go over, it wouldn't work. And it kind of bummed me out. And I was like, all right, back to the drawing board. I kind of respun things around, did things a little bit differently. And The Siege itself, it's a large project because it started last night, but it does not conclude until the end of October. And there's been a gradual buildup between photo images, and a lot of the photo images will have, for example, the most recent ones that I've used will either be a black background or they'll be what appears to be a stairway with a landing. And that was an image that I took a few years ago. And in the actual image, which I know is on social media, you can make out a male apparition at the foot of the stairs. And there's like a post. And he's on the left-hand side of the post, and I listed it online. And then I want to say it was within a few hours after it was posted, somebody responded back, hey, you have 2 other images, which I've never seen. And so there's 3 different images which are on there. So I use that. But for The Siege, there's a lot of writing that's in Latin, that's in the static images that I'll put on there. And it'll have a bunch of Latin words on it, but I'll put in the hashtags. Follow the whispers, which is another way of saying follow the clues. And then I'll say things like Siege, it is coming, the Wraith for the first oracle. And the Wraith and the first oracle are one and the same. In my head, when I created it and I was thinking of it, I didn't want to come out and be like, hey, the first date. I wanted to build the intrigue and the mysterious type of nature to it. So I chose the Wraith. The Wraith I thought was fitting considering the location itself. And it was the site of a huge traumatic event over 250 years ago. But when I pitched it to the new general manager at the location back in, I think it was December, he was like, I love the idea. So we've been talking ever since. He's like my best buddy. And we set our first date last night, and we had 80 tickets that were for sale, and we sold 74 of them. So, I mean,
great.
Yeah, I mean, it went over really good, and we were pretty ecstatic for the first night. And we can't wait to get back up there again in a few weeks.
Yeah. And is it okay to mention the place, or?
Yeah, it's completely fine. Have you watched, I don't know, I'm trying to remember who was in it. Daniel Day-Lewis for, was it Last of the Mohegans?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
that was based on Fort William Henry, which is up in Lake
Oh,
George, New York.
right.
And there was 2 battles that were there. There was one 1755, which there's a battle there, and there was a battle the same battle was at there's a park across the road, and that's the Battlefield Park, and so that was one battle, and then there was 1757, which was obviously the French, and it was several different Indian tribes that were obviously working with the French, and growing up in this area, because I live about an hour south of Lake George, obviously I have grown up going to the fort itself, going to Lake George as a kid, and being a lover of history, I've always loved with what they had going on there. And I thought it would be the perfect location for it with the name. And they were like, we absolutely love it. And so this whole public event series and us being their special guest investigators, and the fort never does this. They never have special guest investigators. I mean, you think about who's been in there in the past. You have ghost hunters. I mean, they were there many, many, many years ago with,
Right.
God, I can't remember who, and I apologize. I'm blanking on their names right now. Jack Osborne was there several years ago. Him and Katrina, they were there. I think they were the last ones that were actually there. So to actually be a guest there and to be a local makes it even that much sweeter.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the coolest place in the world. It's old and it smells old. And I mean, if you have abilities, it's off the charts.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet. I mean, just the rich, I'm a big history buff too. And just the rich history involved in it is amazing because places like jails, well, Gettysburg, history forts, I mean, people lived and died in those forts. There was nothing but the energy of unfortunately suffering, right?
Yes.
And all that energy, again, just doesn't go anywhere. You know,
Oh, it
like
doesn't.
I don't know if you're familiar, like stone tape theory, where the energy, objects absorb it or places absorb the energy, negative or positive, and then
Which
when
I
you
was
go
actually,
in there.
I
Yeah,
was
go
going to
ahead.
lead into that for the whole stone tape theory. In
Yeah,
that, uh, some of the video snippets that I've done for promos, I would have in there, and I'm trying to remember exactly how I worded it off the top of my head. And I've done so many videos and so many clips, it's kind of a blur, even though I have them saved on my phone. But I worded it as if a thunderous roar would echo through the valley, basically meaning, in my head, it was thinking of the cannon fire.
right.
And same with, and I can't remember exactly how I had it worded, but it was about the blood will flow freely into, I can't remember if it was like the lake or the water, but it was the same premise that I was going for. And that was one of the pitches when I initially recontacted them in December. I was, with the exception of certain stock images, the writing that I use, the Latin, and I'm trying to maintain a original but yet historic manner, I guess would be the word that I can use to it. I didn't want to take and have anything that was too over the top. I wanted to stick in a way to what exactly happened there as best as I could. And I've had a lot of people message and send emails and be like, well, hey, what's with all the creepy writing? And we actually talked about it a lot last night because they're like, well, hey, what's the writing all about? And what is with all this? In like, I would do videos for It Is Coming leading up to last night, or I would have the Latin writing, or I would do strange symbols at the beginning of the campaign. But I kind of got away from it in the last couple weeks because it got harder and harder to do videos and include all those clips. So I kind of segued off of it for a little bit, but I'll be going back to it in another few weeks now that it started. And last night I put on social media, one of the hashtags was, I think I put down the first of 3, which is the first of 3 dates leading into what we're actually going to be doing there later this summer.
Nice. Nice. So let's talk about some experiences you had. We're talking offline, and let me back up. Can you tell me about your team? Who is on your team and kind of like some of their functions or whatever you want to say,
Well,
abilities?
initially when I started out solo myself. And my first experience was I was 4 years old and I grew up in an old haunted Victorian home. And I can remember clear as day waking up in the middle of the night, and I know I was wide awake because I lifted my head out of bed and I heard my name called. And I got out of bed and I walked through my house. And at the time, I can remember walking through my living room and I can remember how my body was reacting with what I was feeling. But I walked to my parents' room, stuck my head in. They were asleep. And I ran back to the room, pulled the covers up over my head, and I was like, I'm scared. But from that moment on, I would either feel spirit or I would hear it. And it was really weird growing up in, how can I word it? It was odd to take and to experience it, but a lot of my friends didn't have abilities. And I was afraid of how they would respond to me. So, I mean, anybody that I grew up with, until I went to high school and I graduated high school, I said nothing about it. I kept it completely quiet because in some ways, I was not worried, but I wasn't worried, but yet I was worried, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
it took me a long time to realize like what I was feeling. And it was not probably until I hit my late teens that I was finally able to figure things out. And then I started working with meditation and trying to train those particular aspects to try to hone them in. And my wife doesn't understand it because there was one location we went to, I think it was 2 months ago, and we were still like 6 blocks away from it. And I'm like, oh, it's very strong. And she's like, how can you tell? And I'm like, I can just feel it on my body. It came through hit and miss last night in different times, and they would peek in a little bit, and it's like the energy is starting to shift, and then sometimes it would rush in, and then it would rush right back out. But I've had experiences pretty much my whole life. The last couple investigations we've done, there's one place in particular that we have that's actually not too far away that I'm not going to mention the real name of, other than it's known as the house on Bacon Street.
Okay.
And it's about a 160-year-old location, and it's an amazing location that has an amazing history, but they have a vast amount of, I guess I could say, collectibles and artifacts in their possession. And the last time that we were there was actually in April, and it was a private investigation that was for an auction winner. And her and her son were there, and I have a whole introduction that we do for every event, every location, and I'll change it up, but for the most part, I have it memorized word for word, and I said the whole spiel, like as I call it myself, and I was like, before we actually started the event, I'm like, I'll give you 30 seconds to come forward and to communicate with us. It was silent for probably about 10 seconds, and a male voice came through between the mom and her son, and it said several words in a very low voice. I'm trying to think how I can word it. I could hear it, but I was not sure what was said. My wife could hear it, but she was not sure what was said. What was interesting was we had digital recorders. We had 8 of them that were running on various different floors. And it was a technique that I started doing years ago because I discovered in error one time that I was asking questions in one room, in a digital recorder in a total opposite end of the house was answering the same question. There's one recorder that I had on the second floor in a room, which is known as the doll room. This voice whispered, and you hear this female voice come through, and she says, "Gordon, hush." And there's a pause, and you hear as if she's mad at him. It's like, okay, that's a new name. I've never heard of Gordon. And there's a Timmy, which is there, and we believe Timmy's a little boy. And Timmy dates back to the 1800s. And from what we've been able to piece together over our last several investigations there, he died, I'll say late 1800s, 1900s. We think it was either Spanish flu or it was smallpox. It was one of the two. And he came through for one of the experiments that we're doing, and he came out and he said, we asked him a question, and he said, scared, or I'm scared. But we first came up, he introduced himself last year. So every time we go, they were like, Timmy, are you here? Is that you? And he'll always respond in the same way if we're using, like, for example, necrophonic. It's always the same voice, and he'll be like, yeah. And we'll ask him different questions, and he'll be there. And then obviously the other spirits will interject, but the place is loaded with activity.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this. Let me back up here since we're talking about experiences. So, Bill, what is your most memorable or significant paranormal experience or experiences?
What can I say? Oh boy, there's so many. Some of my most favorite for Battle of Saratoga. I live close by to the actual battlefield. I'm about 10 minutes away from there. So much so that my wife and I, right up till a few years ago, we used to actually go hiking there every weekend because they have tons of trails. that are through there. Battlefield, notoriously haunted. We know there was 2 major battles that were there, Battle of Freeman's Farm and the Battle of Bemis Heights. So there's a trail that's in the battlefield that's called Wilkinson's Trail, and it kind of goes in between both of the fields. So there was one section in particular, and in the one memory that I'm thinking of, my daughter was with us. And I mean, she was little at the time, maybe 10 years old, 11, somewhere around there. And so she came with us, and I had a bag over my shoulder and I had a little Bluetooth speaker, and we were just going to do a short hike for so far just to enjoy the day. So we stopped in this one spot, and I had a bunch of musket fire and cannon fire that was saved on one of my old phones. So I did a trigger object session that was in this particular section of forest. And I mean, it wasn't more than maybe 200 feet wide. And my wife ran to one end, she looked, there was nobody coming. My daughter ran the other end, and they both ran back. So it was only like maybe a minute and a half, because we were worried about a ranger coming through or something like this. And just because the park rangers especially for the battlefield, they're really strict about paranormal investigators obviously coming through. You can't go there at nighttime. Obviously, federal land, you get arrested. So they're very strict with that. So I was worried about that. So we started the whole trigger object session, and I mean, it was maybe 30, 45 seconds, and I'd pause it. And I'm like, does this sound familiar? And it would be a bunch of musket fire, and then there would be cannon fire. And we paused it, and I was like, so who's here with us? And I know that you're here because I can feel you. I know you were around me. Can you tell me your name? And we had a digital recorder as well. When we actually paused the digital recorder, we turned around and we started questioning again. And I started doing the trigger session again. And we heard 3 shots that sounded just like musket fire. I grew up around firearms, so what a rifle sounds like, shotgun, all that. And I'm like, all right. And in my head, I was thinking it, and I looked at my wife, and I'm like, did you hear it? And she's like, yes. And my daughter heard it. So all 3 of us collaborated that. But the same section on another time when I was actually there myself, and I would so love to be able to release the actual video clip, but since it's on federal land, I can't, and it absolutely kills me. But I was walking along, and I had I was using my phone, and I was on the same section, and the trail's kind of flat, and there's a knoll, and it's a little teeny tiny knoll, and trees both sides of the path, and you can kind of see. I remember the sun was like to the right of the trail a little bit, but the sun wasn't high in the sky. It was later in the afternoon, and so I walked through there, and I remember I didn't feel anything. I didn't hear anything. And it was not until I actually got home and put headphones on and I rewatched it. There was one tree in particular, you could see this opaque apparition come out from behind the tree, and it would be going from, if you're viewing the tree, it would be left over towards the trail, and it comes right towards me. And what initially drew me to it was you could hear the air displacement going past my phone, and you could hear the whoosh. And I started backing it up frame by frame by frame. And it was the most interesting thing. But I've heard phantom neighs. I've recorded phantom cannon fire. I've asked questions about what were conditions like back then. And I got a response, which is, I don't even know how I can word it. It's digitized in a way as if a spirit was working its way into the device itself to speak, and it's kind of, and then it says horrible. But I've asked questions about a Brigadier General Fraser, who was our version of special warfare, and he was like best of the best back then. And in history and from the articles that I read, he had a huge breakfast that morning, and it was the Battle of Bemis Heights, and he was shot. Supposedly, the legend has it by a sharpshooter that's here in New York, and was one of the few colonists that actually had a double-barreled musket. And the legend had it that he fired several shots in roughly about a minute time frame. Like the first one hit like the saddle, the second one hit like the horse's mane. And I mean, is there any way to it's actually from him? No, but supposedly they said that he was the one that actually shot this General Fraser. So I was recanting the whole story standing right outside this forest area, and I get this female voice that comes through when we actually got home, and she says, "Don't shoot him." And it made me wonder, is it his wife who lived in England, who was having a tea party at the time? And I researched everything out after the fact. Or was it a Baroness Radiesel who was actually just outside of the battlefield, and there was an old red cottage, and I don't know if they kicked the guy that lived there out or whatever it was, but they took it over and they were making dinner. And the soldiers brought him in, and he laid there in agony on the table for about 19 hours before he passed the next morning. So it was a long blurb in history to come out and say, standing in the middle of the field in the sun, because I remember doing it, and it was an August day. But to capture that particular EVP was absolutely amazing.
Yes. That sounds absolutely amazing because, again, there's such rich history
Yes.
in the Revolutionary War and so many things that happened that people don't know. I mean, you were taught in school about Benedict Arnold and you were taught about George Washington. By the way, I'm a big history buff. That stuff you were taught in school is 90% wrong because now we have the original histories and people have done more research on it and have said, like, no. I mean, like, again, not to go off on a tangent, but like Benedict Arnold, everyone thought he just betrayed us, just whatever. No, he was eventually, and this isn't a history podcast, but he was just passed over, for commands and other things. And it's kind of like if you're at work, I always use this analogy, you're at work and all your friends are being promoted at work.
Oh,
And
you're
you're
gonna.
like, you're like, hey, I'm kicking butt here. I'm one of your best generals, and you keep passing me over. Well, the hell with it. I'm leaving, and I'm gonna go. And that's kind of what it was. It was very, unfortunately, a little bit petty on his part. But if you research it, like, I don't agree with what he did. However, and just things like that and different battles and stuff. And people don't understand, like, when the Americans went toe to toe with the British, they pretty much kicked our butt
Yeah.
because we could not, we just didn't have the experience, the leadership, the, supplies, whatever you want to say. So a lot of it was guerrilla warfare. So when you go, like you said, when you go out, a lot of it was snipers, people just ambushing, British troops. And British troops, again, were so dedicated and so well trained and disciplined. You take out a couple of their leaders and they're kind of like,
Yeah.
what do we do? And that really, like, to the Fort, Henry and everything you're talking about, that adds to it too. If you're just seeing, you're bombarded day after day after day. What's that going to do, right? That's going to mess with your mind, and it's going to.
Oh, it is. And even and I just happen to think of two things. For the battlefield, I can remember there's one trail that leads through the woods, and I forgot, I want to say it was like a 7-mile hike that day. But there was one section in particular of the forest, and I mean, there's no power lines around, nothing. And there's pine trees, and I can remember right where we were. And my wife was in front of me, and she had a Melmute, which is like her favorite device. And she was like, we just hit 34.6. And we're in the middle of the forest, and I had a digital recorder, and I would stop. It would stop, ask a question, keep going. But after a while, I was like, I'm just going to keep right on walking. I want to see what I can capture while I walk. And I know a lot of people are like, all right, it's a major no, and you need to be still. I'm like, you know what? This is for my own use. I want to see what I can get. So I got one piece of audio. And I mean, you could hear the footsteps coming through. And my wife mentioned for 34.6. And I said to her, I was like, wow, that's pretty good. And I said something along the lines like, I know you're here. I can feel you. And I didn't get, it was not a verbal, like, I'm here or hello, get out of here, or whatever. It was, and I can't even like describe it. It was like a growly type of response, which came through. And it reminded me kind of like a dog growling in a way, but it was really weird. And I remember I was actually laying in bed that night and it was like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
I played it for a few people, and couple of people have heard it, and other people like, oh, I don't hear anything whatsoever. But I know you asked me before for my group. I initially started out by myself. I spent roughly about 12 and a half years doing solo, and my wife peppered investigations on and off over the years. And about 4.5 years ago, I was like, you know what? I've accumulated all this knowledge. I've done all these cases over time. Let me start to pass it on. So I thought about 6 months for a name. I couldn't think of a name for the life of me. And I kind of put it on the back burner. And then one day the name Grim Reaper just popped in my head. And I was like, all right, let me think of a logo. And I had a different logo I used. But originally it was my wife and I. And then I brought on Tanya, who's my senior investigator, who is one of my psychics. And Tanya lives pretty close by to me. She actually does a lot of work for cold cases, for missing people and serial killers. And there's actually 2 cases that we're working on that she's worked on, both of them in some fashion. And one of them is Who Killed Whitefeather, which is kind of like a murder mystery that goes back to the mid 1800s. And it was an 18-year-old girl that her body was found floating face down in a pond one Saturday morning in October 1889. She was seen the night before near this bridge. There's different information. Some people saw her with friends, other people saw her without friends standing near this bridge. And of course, it's a small village. It's the late 1800s, and of course, getting dark early. So, but what made it interesting was people thought, okay, well, she committed suicide. She had a hat that had a white feather that was in it, which is why I named it Who Killed Whitefeather. And she had a sweater which was folded neatly on a log on the side of the road. But when they eventually took her body out, she had she didn't have shoes on. She was found floating face down, her hands clasped together with her head facing shore, which is very odd.
Yeah.
And so it piqued my interest. And Tanya had a book at the time, which she gave me. I read it in like 2 days and I got hooked. So ever since then, Who Killed Whitefeather has been a case that right now we're still in production with. We've been in production for about 2 years now with it. And some of the locations are like, yeah, you can film here, you can investigate here, and other ones don't want to be associated with it because it's a small village. And a lot of the names of the people back then still live in that particular village. And but we have that case. And then we have another one where there was the Jalik Rainwalker case, which is a huge name in this area, where he was a little boy. He was maybe 11, 12 years old, and biracial, if I remember correctly. And he just disappeared one day. And his adopted parents they were questioned and everything. And they, I want to say that at first they answered questions, if I remember correctly, and then they just stopped talking whatsoever. They packed their stuff up and they moved out of state, which, I mean, my opinion, that's suspicious. But they started looking for him. They've never found a body. They've never found no clues. Nobody knows where he is, but Tanya's been involved with them. And then there's my wife. And so we were known as the Core 3. That's what I called us, because between the 3 of us, I mean, we have 45 years of experience. Which is a lot. And since then, I've grown from 3. Right now, I have 10. I have 2 full teams that I employ. I have people as far south as New York City and as far north as Lake George. And we do cases from New York City all the way to Lake George, and pretty much half of New York all the way out to Syracuse and all the way over to Boston. So
that's amazing. I mean, I've interviewed people from your area, Bill. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Suddenly Haunted.
I've heard the name, yes.
Yeah, and they're from New York too. And what I love about that area, by the way, I've been to the city of New York about 2 or 3 times. No offense, I don't want to go back. I'm from a small town in Wisconsin, and when I went there, I'm like, nah, it's just not for me. But I'm a big history guy, and the history there is, amazing, because obviously Boston, Philadelphia, places like that too, that's where the predominant places where our country was basically give birth to. And unfortunately, like in New York, Gangs of New York, things like that, if you've seen that movie and other things, yeah, not a little bit of a interesting place just to, talk about. And that's why, again, it's so rich in history of paranormal.
It definitely is. I mean, my hometown is 5,000 people. So I mean, it's small. But even from my hometown, I mean, there's a few haunted places that, walking around as a kid, and I would be with friends, and then I would be thinking in my head, and like, the energy is really strong in here. It is definitely haunted. I mean, one of the churches here in town is haunted, where they've seen a pastor or somebody walking up one of the side aisles, and they wouldn't go in the back room where that's supposed to be for all the priests. And a priest many, many decades ago actually followed this apparition into the room. Nobody was there. And it was one of the stories that I learned about a long time ago. But I mean, Boston, notoriously haunted different sections. I mean,
Yeah.
we go to Boston every February because my daughter is a huge volleyball player for a local, not only school, but for club. And so we do traveling a lot for about 6 months. So in February, we were in Boston and I was like, hey, while I'm there, I'm going to do some haunted spots. Our hotel was haunted. And even though they didn't come out and it's like it's haunted, the minute we got in and after we were all checked in and we were walking to the elevator, and I remember leaning over to my wife and I'm like, it's haunted here. And she's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like 150 years old. And we had crazy responses in our hotel room. We walked to Boston Commons, notoriously haunted. We went to the God, I can't think of it's King Philip Cemetery, which is just outside of Boston Commons. We walked through there quick, notoriously haunted, which a lot of the gravestones, early 1700s.
Yes.
I mean, obviously we're there for an ulterior motive, so I was doing double duty while I was there. But it's like activities everywhere.
Yeah, and that's amazing. So let me ask you this question. A lot of my paranormal investigators, you have to draw a fine line between the scientific and like the experimental, right? So for example, Estes method, that's kind of I would say a newer method, but relatively newer compared to some of the other methods. So how do you do that fine line, Bill, between, when you do an investigation, you need solid evidence,
Yes.
because you don't want to be like, oh, there's a bunch of ghosts running around and, come on, there's tons of videos on YouTube where it's faked, and it gives you and your team, as well as other teams that I've interviewed, a bad name, frankly, because everybody's like, oh, you guys are all fake, this don't exist. When you're on investigation, how do you do that? Like, what equipment do you use, or methods that you be like, okay, we got to make sure we're getting solid evidence?
It actually varies depending on the location. So, for example, I won't use the fort because, well, the fort's 60,000 square feet, even though it's notoriously haunted. And I mean, it's an immense property. But I'll use the house on Bacon Street just because the last 2 years we've been there. Well, I've been there 9 times. And I mean, it's local, and it's one of those that it's one of the cases right now that's kind of like it's been at the top of my list right up until probably a few weeks ago because I got much larger projects coming up. But for the house on Bacon Street, whenever we investigate there, we'll DVR system. I mean, we'll bring in 8 cameras on top of the last time we were there. We had 3 infrared cameras that we rolled. We had body cameras that certain people wore, 8 digital recorders. We've used different equipment over the years. I mean, we've used for the plasma ball that we used to have like when we were kids.
What's that, Bill? What's the plasma ball? What's that?
The plasma ball where you could put your hand on it and it would have like
Right.
like the what's the word that I want to use? Like as if it was electric current that was going like a Tesla coil. And I bought one a few years ago that you can not only touch, but it sensed a vibration. And we've tried it there. We've tried it on tables. We've tried it putting rubber feet on it to try to help isolate. And it's like, well, hey, maybe if the building shifts or a car goes by, it might cause a false positive. And so we tried using a form of cushioning. And the last time we used it, we just would start asking different questions. And I mean, we had a plasma ball. We've tried cat balls. Cat balls are kind of cool. They light up.
Yeah.
And can you have some good responses with them? Yes. REM pods, absolutely love to death. And we've tried different devices in different rooms, and it's hit and miss what you can truly use for a location. I mean, and to be honest, I mean, who's to say what way is truly the correct way? I mean, everybody out there acts like they're an expert. And I'm like, okay, I mean, if you've been doing this forever, and I mean, for Jason Hawes, I mean, he's like the Godfather, Johnny Zaffis.
Right.
Godfather, I mean, you worship these people, even though they're both incredibly nice guys. And to get their advice, obviously you're going to listen. They've been around forever.
Right.
But what truly works, what doesn't work. And that's one of the beauties of the paranormal. And I know they're trying to obviously classify things. I mean, for example, EVPs. But what's the true definition? What is the true standard? And over the years, we've just tried different things. Hey, let's try this for a location. Does it work? Great. Next time we go back there, we'll use it again. And I mean, every investigation is different. Every investigation, I've used something different. I mean, sometimes for example, last night, and I know a lot of groups out there and a lot of people, they don't like apps whatsoever. They don't like Necrophonic or Spirit Talker or Necrometer. And I have all three on my phone. I like all three. Last night, I leaned more for Necrophonic, just the responses. Was I recording it? Yes. So I can go back later on tonight. I'll put headphones on and I'll start listening to it and to see what some of the responses are. Some of the responses that came through last night were really incredible. But I'm really looking forward to getting into all the audio that we recorded, because we had, 6 digital recorders, and we were there for about 5 hours. I got about 30 hours worth of audio to listen to. So
Yeah. Yeah. So let's stick with that. Here's my biggest thing that I've spoken to all the paranormal investigators, which I think is super hard to do. So when you get all your evidence back, Bill, how do you know the difference between maybe, I don't know, someone's talking outside on the street, there's a car driving by and the headlights come through versus actual real paranormal evidence? How do you determine that? What's your kind of your method?
So in regards to cars going by, that's one and obviously it depends on the location. Are we inside? Are we outside? If we're inside, we tend to use help. I've used ripped up black contractor bags and used painter's tape to cover over windows. I've used landscaping fabric to cover over windows to help block the light from the outside, to help darken up the room. I've done investigations with just to have them bare. And obviously between that and using DVR cameras, in particular for the house on Bacon Street, there's a room that's known as the doll room. There's a major road that's about 50 feet right outside. And on a digital recorder, can you hear the hum of a car going by? Can I hear the roar of the engine? By all means, yes, on one of the digital recorders. But with how I place the cameras, depending now that I'm with knowing the layout of the traffic and with how I have the cameras, and with multiple cameras, I can flip back and forth. Like right up in front of me here, I have a large screen TV that I usually use, and I'll put up all 9 cameras all on one screen, and I'll play all 8 or 9 all at the same time. And I'll break up the clips from there so I can see if a car is going by from a certain way. Okay, so maybe the shine is related to that I'm catching, for example, in the doll room is related to this particular car going by. Okay, maybe it's not. But then sometimes I'll have a car that goes by and it'll be, for example, 15, 20 seconds after. And then I'll have like a weird type of orb that will go darting by the screen. And for the doll room in particular, and I know I have tons of photos and videos on social media. I mean, we were there one time. I was there shooting B-roll, and I had a GoPro, just a hand clamp, a mount kind of pointed over a crib in the doll room. That's what I nicknamed it, because there's 3 dolls, and all 3 dolls are creepy as fuck. And they're both,
I hate dolls.
well, one of them's 130, 140 years old. They know the doll goes back to the mid 1800s, and it's from Germany. And there's very few of them left in the world. So I had an EMF meter on one, for example, towards the doll's feet, and then I would put a digital recorder towards the head. I have half hour, 45 minutes where the EMF meter has just pegged red the whole time. And I've just fast forwarded it, and I've looked at the blueprints. There's no power lines that are outside. There's no power lines that are out in front of the building. There's no electrical outlets that are in the front wall or in that particular section. It's like, okay, so where is this particular energy coming from? And this room is very active, but there's other rooms in the place where they have 2 mirrors that are on outside walls, and we're convinced that both mirrors are portals. And some of the apparitions and some of the weird activity that we've seen coming through, it defies logic in a way. And I'm really excited because one of our newest members, and we've had a huge rapid expansion in the last month. Actually, no, about 6 weeks or so. I brought on a psychic named Ariel, who coincidentally has lived in this area for 2 years. Usually one day a week. In this case, it's Monday afternoons. I usually will have a post that will go out and be like, hey, I'm still wanted. I'm looking for additional people. And in this case, I'm still looking for additional people because I want to grow back up to having 3 teams. Right up until last year, I had 3 teams. I cut it back over the wintertime. Some people moved. Some people didn't want to do it anymore. And I'm like, you know what? It is what it is. So I've shrunk it down. So I want to go back up to the 3 teams for the growth. But for Ariel in particular, she's a clairvoyant. And when she filled out my application and she read over the packet, I was in my living room, and I stopped what I'm doing, and I remember looking at my phone, and I looked at her application, and my application is pretty easy. I mean, I have a PDF packet that I ask people to read, and you have to read it over before you fill out the app. And she has a professional resume. It's like her resume was 3 pages long. And I remember, holy shit. And I've ever since then, I've like gushed over her resume because of how detailed it is. And I was like, this is beautiful. And I spoke with her. We spoke for like 3.5 hours. I spoke with her like 2 days later. We spoke again. I offered her a position, and she's like, by all means. And besides her being such a nice person, with her being clairvoyant and being able to see the dead. And I tested her on that. I have one video clip that I've used, and I've used it many times. And she picked out everything that was on there on this particular clip that I know was already there. And I'm like, okay, so she's the real deal. And I'm looking forward to having her go to like the house on Bacon Street. Fort William Henry, which actually for Fort William Henry, there's a video clip that I just did. I filmed it last night when we were picking everything up. And they were kind of trying to shush me out the door. And at this late, it's already after 11 o'clock. And the 2 ghost guides, they wanted to get home. But I was filming a quick clip, only like 30 seconds long. I sent it to her at like 2 o'clock this morning. So I was like, hey, here's a bunch of clips. And it's like, look at them. So she looked at this particular one. She goes, there's 6 soldiers that are standing in the courtyard as you were walking by, and they were looking at you and listening to what you are saying. And it's like, that's really cool. And there was a bunch of other ones that I sent where one in particular, she picked out a woman who saw us coming, and she kind of scurried and walked around a corner. And by the time we got to the corner, she was already gone. But I mean, last night activity was interesting. Beforehand, it was, you could feel the energy. You could feel the energy building and shifting. You could tell that it was peeking around corners and wondering who we were. And I tend to, when I go into buildings, I'm like, I know you're here. I can feel you. And I'll just start talking out loud to try to build a comfort factor and a trust factor. And the minute we started, it was peaks and valleys. It would pop up, and then of course it would die right off. And for our second time slot that we did last night, we actually, a young man actually collapsed in one section of what's known as the gunpowder magazine. And I've seen the video of him from one of the other guests that was there. And it was the gunpowder magazine. I mean, it's only like maybe 20 feet underground now. And maybe when they rebuilt the fort in the 1950s, it's supposedly on the actual footprint of the fort or in close proximity. So for the gunpowder magazine in particular, I mean, you go down this long tunnel, and it's maybe 50 feet long or so. So you can tell you're going underground. You make a left-hand turn, then you make another left-hand turn, and you're under what would be the North Barracks. And the North Barracks were actually bombarded by cannon fire back in 1757 by the French. Cannonballs actually smashed through the walls back then, destroyed, if I remember correctly, destroyed the gunpowder magazine. And, but one of the stories, which I've never actually heard before until, probably about a week or so ago, was actually my newest member, Zach, who was there with his son. And he was telling me the story of where he was there. And he originally responded to me because I had a photo on the fort. And he was like, hey, I've captured this. Do you mind looking at it? So we kind of just stuck up a conversation. And I was like, well, hey, if you're ever interested in investigating and research, I'm looking for people. So he filled out an application. I recruited him. I brought him on. But for his video clip, he had his son was saying, I'm going to light a match. And what will happen if I light a match? And he stopped speaking, and you can hear the shuffling of feet, and you can hear like a whisper right afterwards. So I actually was replicating it last night, and between having EMF meters and obviously 2 digital recorders, and there was cameras rolling. And I asked them beforehand, it's like, hey, do you mind if I'm in the gunpowder magazine? I know there's nothing that's there that's gunpowder oriented. And they're like, yeah, just be careful with it. So I actually started all this before this young man actually collapsed. And I had necrophonic actually going at the time. And some of the interaction that was coming through, and it got quiet for a limit. And one of the rules that I put in place years ago is we don't instigate. And it's like no provoking by any means. I'll push the limit. I'll use reverse psychology. And it's an individual thing among all of us. And if we think we're going too far, any one of us can be like, all right, let's cut back a little bit. And I pushed it as far as I felt willing to go. And I was like, I got a lighter. And I'm like, what's going to happen? Different guests were reporting that you could hear shuffling. You could hear what sounded like tapping on wood. And I mean, the tapping on wood could be anything. It could be the building shifting. It
Yeah.
could be maybe somebody leaning against it that we couldn't see. But this was some of the things that around the corner that I was being told. And I was holding a lighter and I was actually sparking it. And roughly around the same time that this young man actually collapsed. And coincidentally, he's actually a family friend. Friends of ours live nearby, and they're like, hey, we bought tickets, and their daughter wanted to go because she's all into the paranormal, and we've been camping buddies for the last couple of years. And so they came, and it was his stepson that actually collapsed. And from what I've been told and from watching the video, you can see him, he's like, takes off his hat, and he's very fidgety, like a minute or two beforehand. And he's moving around a little bit, and he kind of leans against the wall, and you just see him go down. That particular video clip that was sent to me, I actually sent it over to Ariel, and I'm like, so what do you see? And she's like, well, there's a name that's coming through, because I asked, what's your name? And she goes, I'm picking up the name by, I want to say she said Peter. But there was also another older man that came through that answered the question as well. But when the young man actually collapsed, a spirit said, drink water. And I was told that towards the end of the clip, right after that part, the apparition that was near him actually dissipates and fades out of sight. And I'm like, that's actually really cool. So I'm looking forward to the next time we go there of having her with us to, hey, I'm seeing this. And some of the things that she's told me that she sees, I even wonder about. She was telling me things that she was seeing in some of the clips. And I'm like, well, I didn't see anything, felt lots of energy last night, but I didn't see this. And it's like, well, that kind of defies what I'm being told that I'm still trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah. So that leads me to a question here that I always ask paranormal investigators, because people, I guess you have to understand, if you're not a paranormal investigator, there are risks that come with this. Bill, like, what are your thoughts on the potential dangers of certain types of paranormal activity? And then how do you mitigate those risks? I mean, how do you keep everyone safe on your team as well as you safe too, in a situation that, again, might get a little out of hand?
It's a fine line. Every one of us has different practices that we'll use. For example, for my wife and I, before we even go into any location, and it's like, we'll do the usual. I mean, I grew up Catholic, so it's the usual, Our Father, the Hail Mary, and just a quick prayer. It's like, be like, Father, please cast the white light around us, bless us and protect us and keep us safe from the harm and evil that might be there. And I mean, we said that last night when we went in there, and then obviously when we leave, and I've made it standard practice for everybody that, hey, we're all Palo Santo or Sage or both, and it's like, I'd rather us be safe. And I mean, have I had things come home? Yes, I've been to a neighboring cemetery for Oakwood Cemetery that's in Troy. I mean, beautiful cemetery, incredibly haunted cemetery, and I was there 3 years ago, and I brought home, even though I cleansed myself. Obviously, I didn't cleanse myself good enough, and it's still attached, or maybe it even hung and attached to a piece of equipment. And for several nights afterwards, I can remember anytime I closed my eyes, and I didn't feel weird or anything, but anytime I closed my eyes, I saw an old woman who was in black and white, who her hair was down to, I'll say, mid-chin, hanging in front of her face, and she looked like she was pissed. And she was very upset. Maybe she was trying to tell me a story, or maybe she was mad because I disturbed her or something like that. But for about 3-4 days time frame, she was with me. And then one morning I woke up and she was gone. I've laid in bed at night. I've heard a little boy's voice in my left ear, because I'll fall asleep on my left side, saying, I'm still here at that same particular cemetery. And knocking on wood, the last couple of years have been really good. If there's anything, I'll leave. It's very rare that I leave equipment in my garage, but if there's anything, occasionally I'll leave it out there. I've left it outside, and some investigators bring haunted objects into their home. I refuse to bring an object into my home just because it's my sanctuary. I have my daughter here. I have my wife here. Do spirits still come in? Yes. I've seen apparitions in my house. My house is only 55 years old. And I mean, it just goes to prove it. Age doesn't matter for a structure, but for the apparition that I saw in my house was 3 winters ago. I think it was 3 or 4 winters ago. And I was remodeling our master bathroom and had it gutted. So we have to walk through the other side of the house. And it was around Christmas time. I got up like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. I don't remember, like, for example, like what day of the week it was, other than like I'll say 2 to 3 o'clock. And walking through my kitchen, I'm standing at the threshold for my living room and looking towards the front door. And our front door has an oval glass in it. And I remember seeing the Christmas lights on outside, and I could see the white of the snow. And what first drew my attention was I could make out an apparition standing, and I don't know if it was male or woman, just because of the lighting. And it was so translucent that I could make out a head. I could make out hair that was down to almost shoulders. And I remember seeing like black and white hair. And then from the shoulders down, it completely dissipated. You couldn't see anything. And I was in such a deep sleep. I was like, I don't have time for this. I have to pee. And it was not until I was washing my hands and I was like, what did I just say? And for the next several nights, I woke up at the same exact time trying to replicate it. And it drives me crazy that I didn't feel anything. I didn't hear anything. And I was just so tired in such a daze. And I just kind of stood there looking at it, and it didn't move. It didn't do anything. It just kind of stood there. And the only thing I could think of was obviously remodeling a house or any location. You might stir something up. So I'm like, all right, maybe I stirred something up that was from this, or maybe it was a traveling spirit that was coming through.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing. People have the misconception your house has to build, I don't know, they got built in the 1800s and, blah, blah, blah. It's haunted kind of thing. No, I've interviewed people where they build a new house. I mean, it's like 5 years old and they see shadow people and they've had interactions and everything with different spirits. And I think that's fascinating to me because you're like, well, gotta remember, it's very sad to say this, but basically everywhere in the country, with exception of a few places, are Native American burial grounds.
Yes.
Because unfortunately, again, we were not very nice to the Native Americans. Everybody, that's not a secret. But really, you don't know. I mean, if you're living in certain areas, you might be on a Native American burial ground. And when these houses were being built, people were like, normally you have to stop and you have to bring in a team of archaeologists or somebody to take a look. But that's not always the case. There's numerous stories out there where people are like, why am I having all these issues? And then they bring someone out to do some research and they find out you're on a Native American burial site or grounds where there were severe battles or something like that. So before we wrap up here, one of the questions is I always ask paranormal investigators too is, do you do personal investigations? In other words, if someone calls you and says, Bill, I think something's going on in my house, could you please come over and check it out?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
I do. There was one that we consulted with, and it wasn't the normal one where a phone call or a text message. And I mean, for all our social media accounts, I have them all synced together. So any message, doesn't matter if it's TikTok, Facebook, through our website, or even what's the other one? Instagram. They're all interconnected. It's going to come across on my phone. And I was looking online one night. In this particular case, Dave Schrader had a message about, does anybody live in New York? So there's a bunch of people that responded to his post, and I followed him for years, and I've loved his content. And he's such an awesome guy. And so I responded back to the message, and I was like, yeah, I'm actually based an hour south of there. I'm definitely very interested. And a couple of days later, I got a phone call from some number I didn't realize. I thought it was like a scammer trying to sell me like a car warranty. And she left a message and stuff like that. And it was an older woman. And I kept her phone number saved. And she sent me like a bunch of videos, and I talked with her, and she was telling me about this particular house that she lives in this particular town that she lives in. And my wife and I have actually driven up that way. Her town has a lot of activity. It's way up north towards the Lake Champlain. I mean, one of the largest lakes in the United States, like 125 miles long, and it's like several miles wide at the latest point. And it's beautiful up there. So you wouldn't think for this little town it being so incredibly haunted as it is. But she was telling the story about, for the last couple of years, she's been terrified. She sees shadow figures, poltergeist activity, doors open, doors close. And she sent a bunch of videos through, and I talked with her. We started talking about it, and I was like, okay, before we actually drive up to consult, and spend 2 hours driving up, be there the whole day, 2 hours driving back. Let me do video. And so we initially started with video, and I had Ariel look it over, and she's like, there's definitely activity that's there. She's like, this is the type of spot that whether it's the house or the land, there's a negative energy, which is on this particular property. And I can remember in one of the videos she sent me, she's like, whenever I'm in this particular room, I have a shadow figure charges me. And she's like, I won't go in this room. The only time I go in it at nighttime. She had doors that were padlocked shut because she was petrified about having them open. And after looking at all the videos, she was like, there's definitely a negative energy. There's definitely spirits that are here. And we were on the cusp of going up to investigate. But at the same time frame, she was also getting ready to move out. And her main question was, hey, if I move out, is this going to follow me?
Yeah.
And I spoke with her one morning before I actually went to work. And I was like, might it? Yes. And I'm like, but the best thing you can do is to actually sanitize yourself. Use sage, use Palo Santo. And she goes, I'm Catholic. I'm actually going to go see my local priest tomorrow. And one of the things that she actually said to me, that she actually had her local priest come to the house, and he was going to bless her inside the home. And she told me in one of the video messages, just as I'm looking at my camera, and I remember her looking right at her phone, and she's like, while he was getting ready to bless me, she could hear a male voice in her ear saying, don't do it. And
Wow.
I was like, that is really creepy.
Yeah.
And I was like, let's start out with this. And it's like, if the activity continues, and then by all means, we'll come up. And I was telling my wife about it. And coincidentally, it's a small, very small town. We were about a half a mile away, 3/4 of a mile away. And there's it's now a public building. But back then, it was the headquarters for a major company that was up that way. And notoriously haunted. They've footsteps, people are touched. There's a museum right next door, and multiple instances of people looking up to the third floor window, and they would see a man or a woman looking down at them in full color. Well, the only difference is we're on the third floor. Those windows, the bottom of the window is 6 foot, 6.5 feet up in the air, and I'm 6'3", and I can't even see out the window. So you'd have to be 10 feet in the air. And
Wow.
I mean, the for the building itself, haunted without a doubt. And there's actually photos that I know I have still online of where I'm actually up in I'm going to call it a widow's walk, but up in the cupola, and very narrow, sketchy staircase. I mean, the boards are like half an inch thick, and to the point where I could actually look down through the framing and see down like 30 feet. And you could see like people's initials like written on the boards and like chalk and shit. And there's a window that's on the right-hand side. And I was standing there, and we were using, might have been necrophonic. It was one of the apps, or spiritus. But we were using one of the apps, and I was asking different questions. I was recording what the responses were. And we had a digital recorder that was sitting up on the landing up there, and a male voice comes through, and it says, it's time to fly. And the only thing that I can think of is it's referring to the window, which is right next to me, wanting to push me out the window down below. And I remember looking out the window saying, holy shit, it's a long way down.
Yeah.
But that place is amazing. And just to be in so close proximity for both places, we definitely got to get back up.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like something you need to further investigate. You know, I always think it's really hard for a paranormal investigator to investigate a personal residence because, let's be honest, you might drive 2 hours and do some investigation, and this is oversimplified. It might be they have a boiler in their basement, and it's just an old boiler. It's just weird, you know what I mean? Like a boiler furnace or pipes, or you know what I mean? That you just debunk it right away, right? You're like, yeah, I'm sorry, it's fine.
Which is very true, but at the same time frame, it's like, and there's different methodologies that are out there. Do you want to do the research beforehand and gather all the information? I tend to use the word intelligence a lot. So I'm like, gather all the intelligence, or do you want to go on the investigation clean slate and then do the research afterwards? I've gone both ways. And then a few years ago, I started switching things over to all the information first. And we tend to use I have a whole proprietary system that I use. And there are certain specific things that I look for. But on average, our case files are 2.5, 3 inches thick. Do I use all the material? No. But a lot of the information that I gather from there, I would rather have a printout of possible names of people who have lived in a house so I can ask target specific questions to try
Sure.
to elicit a targeted response, an intelligent response, compared to if you are male, can you speak into the digital recorder and what is your name, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, I want to know if it's, for example, I'll use Colonel Sanders, but is it Colonel Sanders? Do you inhabit this? Like, are you upset? Why is this activity? And it doing very specific questions, and even for the forwarding, my stack is about this thick. In
Wow.
names, old maps, geological surveys, even if there's fault lines that are located nearby. Does it have a limestone foundation? Is there limestone that's in the ground? How close is it? Well, in this case for the fort, I mean, obviously, major traumatic event, the whole village of Lake George, huge traumatic event. You have smallpox cemeteries. You have what? They don't have accurate numbers. I'll just say 25 people that were scalped. And I mean, there's written accounts out there of the actual British surgeon that was in the sick bay for this, which turned out to be for smallpox. And Indians came in and they were just scalping everybody, dragging them out, and they were scalping them right outside of the hospital. And obviously, they would make off with their scalp, or in some cases, they were beheaded. And unfortunately, it's sad for with what went on back there. But no, I
Yeah.
tend to utilize a lot of research, and it works very well for us. And I actually enjoy doing the whole research process. But
Yeah.
even after the fact, I mean, between storing the cases not only on a portable hard drive, I tend to use a cloud server. So that way, any members of my team, I can give them access to that particular file anytime that I
Yeah.
want. I can revoke it. I can change whatever their settings might be, but I'll keep in there. And everything has a subfolder. So I'll have like a case name. And for example, it'll be 25 025. 25 is just the year, and 025 is the number of cases so far that
Yeah.
were in for that year. But I'll have it subdivided. I'll have it for DVR. I'll have it for digital recorders. And inside the digital recorders, and I have it broken down again. And I have each of our digital recorders is labeled. So I know what particular piece of audio was in what particular device and where exactly that device was in said
Right.
location. But on top of
Yeah.
that, then we started using newer technology like LiDAR, like scanning software. So we can be in, for example, a location, and we can 3D scan the entire location, and I can pull it up on a computer screen. I can spin it 360 degrees. I can zoom into a particular room, look at it in color, and so I can, if there's a detail that's missing or I can't remember where it was, and be, for example, DR6 for digital recorder 6. Well, okay, it was in the dining room, and okay, I know where it was. Well, let me look at the 3D scan so I can see where exactly I had it at that time. I'm trying to work it into our investigations more for evidence presentation, but I want to utilize the software because about 2 years ago, we came up with the concept for a paranormal documentary series called The Reaper Chronicles, where we combine cutting edge techniques with sound principles, such as, for example, the 3D scanning, being able to utilize that and zoom into a location to start a documentary. So, like the house on Bacon Street is one. House on Bacon Street for the fort, that is going to be another one. Who Killed Whitefeather to Lake Rainwalker is another one. I got about 5 other ones that I have on a board over my shoulder in different stages and different concepts. Where, I mean, for everybody puts videos on YouTube, okay, it's an hour, it's 90 minutes. Well, we wanted to do it differently. We wanted to make inside each documentary, while overall it's a documentary, there's going to be multiple episodes that
Yeah.
complete the whole documentary. So that way you get more product just under one title. And we're really looking forward to getting back to that later this year. But I mean, until the end of October, we're going to be busy. I mean, I have you today, and in another couple of weeks, we're back at the fort. 2 weeks after that,
Love
we're at
it.
a jail. The week after that, we're back at the fort. And then it keeps bouncing around between different cases through the end of October, and I'm already planning out into January.
I love that. I love that. It sounds amazing. So, one question before we go that I ask all paranormal investigators If I gave you the unlimited checkbook, Bill, you could go anywhere you want in the world. What would be your number one bucket list place you want to investigate?
See, that's a tough one. And that's one that you really can't give one answer to. I could name like 4 or 5 off the top of my head. If I was going to
Okay.
pick one, I would probably, I mean, Hinsdale House is like 4 hours from me, and we're actually going to be there later on this year, so I won't
Okay.
use that. I was going to say that, I'd probably Waverly Hills. Hands
Waverly
down,
Hills.
most favorite location ever.
Love
I
it.
love the size of it and the whole
Love it.
grandeur. The building is just massive. And I mean,
Yeah.
and we've all watched episodes from everybody that's been there.
Right.
From every episode in my head, I would make notes. I'm like, oh, you know what? I really like what they did with
Mhm.
this. And I remember from one of the episodes in particular, they were using drones. And it had a
Oh.
thermal camera on it. So they were launching a drone, but they were looking for a thermal activity on different floors. And I'm like, you know what would actually be really cool is to take a drone. And I mean, obviously it would take multiple batteries to be able to do it. But to actually have the drone while you're on that particular floor, filming from the outside. And so if you're going from right to left, to actually pan across the screen with you. And I'm like, that would actually be like really cool. And that'd be kind of fun to probably Waverly Hills, but even near me, and I know it's part of a state park, so I can't gain access to it. There's a old prison, which is on top of a mountain near me called Mount McGregor. And
Okay.
very, very small. They closed, it was an old medium security prison. They closed down a couple of years ago. And it's a granite mountain. So we have granite for the material, stone tape
Yeah.
theory. Back in the late 1800s, it used to be a 5-star resort, had a 2-story hotel, which was there. The hotel burned down once. They rebuilt it. That was 1885. 87, it was reopened again. It burnt down again. In the 1900s, an insurance company put in a sanatorium on top of the mountain for the whole concept for the fresh air. And it stayed that way for a period of time. Then it became a prison. Within the prison grounds, and here's where it's weird, there's President Grant's cottage, which is inside the gates. My one newest member, Zach, went there yesterday. And I actually, later tonight, I got to give him a call up on it because he was freaking out he was using different apps and he was with his son and they were going through there. But there's President Grant's cottage, which is rumored to be haunted with the housekeeper. And she looks over the place, but he was getting really weird responses, really weird activity on the grounds that are there. But for the actual prison itself, you have all this here. I mean, okay, it's a medium security prison. Do I know if anybody died there? No. But you think of the number of people that have been there over their lifetime, plus the sanatorium where people did die, which does in fact still have a body chute because there's a tunnel which goes from one of the main buildings underneath the main road, which leads me into, Zach actually messaged me yesterday and he goes, hey, I'm getting like this really weird shit coming through and I'm in one spot. And I'm like, well, okay, well, where are you? And I called him up and it's 87 degrees here. And I'm putting stuff in the back of my expedition, because we were getting ready to drive up towards Lake George for the fort last night. And I'm like, all right, so what's going on? We're talking about it. And so I was telling him all this and I'm like, well, there's a body chute, which is through there. And he's getting responses of, I fell in a cave. I died. There's bodies that are around me. And as far as I'm aware of, I want to say there's no caves that are near there, but I know there's a body chute and I know there's tunnels and there's a tunnel network under the complex, which is still there, but it's like for Mount McGregor itself. And I mean, it's now part of state park. They have fences everywhere. In last I knew, I want to say they still have cameras and I know it's regularly patrolled, but I'm like, you know what? It's like, I would love to go up there and just to see what I personally experienced. I mean, I'm only 30 minutes away from there. I've gone hiking on the back side of the mountain that's there. I've never actually gone up towards the fence itself to check it out, but I do know that one of the reported sightings that's there is of a little girl that's routinely seen wearing a yellowish type of dress inside the prison walls, and people have reported seeing her inside prison itself staring out from inside the prison. Which
That's
really
really
makes me wonder, but I would love to be able to go there. If I could go anywhere, I could get access to there, I would go there in a heartbeat just because, well, A, it's local and nobody's ever been there before.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds really good. I haven't heard of that one. That's a good one. I always tell people I'm still stuck in Transylvania. I want to go to Dracula's castle. I wanna check that out and, see what I find.
I would love to maybe someday to be able to do that, but I'm like, you know what? There's so many places that are around here,
Very true.
and it's like I love the large locations, but over the last couple of years, I'm like, you know what? I really like the lesser known places, and I've switched philosophies over the years, and I'm like, well, hey, we can do Rolling Hills, we can do Hinsdale, we can go Conjuring House, we can go here, we can go there, and my claim to fame over the last couple of years is organically growing cases. And I tend to call them virgin properties for investigators that have never been there
Yeah.
before. And I mean, last year we had 4 that were just like this. And a lot of it is by doing the research. And for example, what's around here or neighboring towns or even outside of New York itself. And actually doing the legwork instead of, hey, well, let's go here because it's haunted. And it's like, my response is, well, hey, how about you actually do research and find a location
Right.
yourself and actually work the location to try to gain access because there's another new location that that might be more haunted than, for example, Waverly Hills or Hinsdale or a Rolling Hills or some of the other locations that are out.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much, Bill. I could talk to you forever. This
I
was
can do this for
amazing.
hours.
Yeah, this is amazing. And I appreciate you, with your paranormal hangover. Now you can relax, go to your pool and have a beverage.
I'm pretty wired right now. I'm like, all right, between the coffee and chatting, I know that once I stop and I actually decompress a little bit, I'll be like, you know, I just want to like float in a raft with like a beer and do nothing for like an hour.
That sounds great. That sounds awesome. So, if you could tell my spooky friends where they can find you and view some of this great material that you have out and that is coming up.
So we have accounts on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or through our website itself. Website address is Grim Reaper Paranormal, all one word, .com. And the Grim Reaper Paranormal on all across social media is also one word. I know there's a couple different Grim Reapers that are out there, which usually have spaces in the name. I tend to have my logo, which is on my website. That's how the logo is the same across all of them. Or if you actually head to my website, and if I remember correctly, it's actually at the bottom. I have hot links to all the social media accounts.
Love it. And, please let your team know, Bill, if they want to come on the podcast, you can just send me you can just DM me or whatever, because I'd love to have different members of the team on. So they're more than welcome if you want to be like, hey, why don't you go on and, get on John's podcast. I'd love to support you any way I can. For my spooky friends, once this comes out, all of Bill's links and everything will be in the episode notes. So you can go and please support him and please do everything. If you have anything you want to talk to him about, I'm sure, Bill, you would love to hear from people, and see how maybe you can help them.
I love chatting about anything with the paranormal. I mean, I can
Love
do
it.
this for hours.
Love it. Well, thank you again so much. Again, enjoy your rest of the day once you decompress and everything. And I'm looking forward to maybe having you back on sometime and talking about further
Definitely.
investigation.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Bill. And you stay spooky.
Thank you for having me.